Dobro jutro svima. Good morning to everyone. Dobrodošli.
Good morning to everyone, and welcome to our today's conference, Multi-Annual Financial Framework covering the period between 21 and 27, Cohesion and Values. The microphone was cut off.
Dobro.
All right. I would like to thank you all for coming and for being here for our conference today. Particularly, I would like to thank our panelists. We have with us Mr. Carlo Ressler, an MP, Ms. Spomenka Juric, who is State Secretary with the Regional Ministry for European Funds and Tourism, Ms. Simona Manova, who represents the European Commission, Mr. Goran Pauk, who is here on behalf of the Croatian County Association, and also the Dubrovnik-Neretva County President. Today's panel will be moderated by Mr. Adrian Abidio-Teba, a colleague from the Committee of the Regions. I would also like to thank our interpreters who are here to help us today, understanding each other, being able to follow this conference. Briefly, some words of introduction. The Dubrovnik-Neretva County traditionally organizes these conferences for this very special week, the Regions and Cities Week, held annually in Brussels. This time, we have perhaps the most topical issue that we could possibly think of, and that is the multi-annual financial framework. The European Union's annual budget covering the next 7-year period, 21 through 27. It's not just about a budget, though. It's also about European Union strategy, a strategy that will be followed, and a strategy that the European Union will use to stay competitive in our world. Our rivals, as we know, are the United States, Russia, China, and so on. I propose to pass the floor to our speaker now, our conference president, and after that we'll be hearing from our panelists as well. And anybody else with comments and questions to raise, those too are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dobroslavic. It's a real pleasure for me to debate this day about the next MFF. I am a mayor in Romania, Transylvania, and I'm a member in the Committee of Region. I have rapporteur for better communication of cohesion policy. So it's a real pleasure today to talk about the next MFF, because we want in the next MFF as cohesion policy remain at least at the same level as it is now. So there is a real debate between cohesion and competitiveness in Europe, but I think that can go together, and we have to know how to do it. And we see in the last election that we have a large participation, especially of the young generation. Sorry.
Someone touches
It's technology. Please don't touch the microphone because you take my microphone. So in the last election, we have a large participation of young generation. We have here a new elected member of European Parliament. So we are in the crossroad of the new Commission, a new Parliament, and we have to know what we'll do in the next year in Europe. The last Eurobarometer, which was presented 2 days ago, shows the awareness of people about the presence of European funds in each city and towns of our regions was increasing from 35 to 40%, which is a good news for all of us. And also the positive impact that the European funds has at local development, increasing from 79 to 81%, which is a good news that all the campaigns we do in order to have dialogues with our citizens, I think there we can see some results. So now I take the floor to Mr. Nicola Dobroslavic, who is president of Dubrovnik-Neretva regions. He has a rapporteur for the next MFF, and please, Mr. Nicola, tell us what are the main considerations from your report.
Hvala lijepa.
Thank you very much. I was rapporteur for the COR opinion on the MMF. So let me tell you briefly about our conclusions. We, as an institution, are representative of the local and regional self-government in the European Union, and these are observations based on the document proposed by the European Commission in May 2018. We, in the Committee of the Regions, debated this at our plenary. The opinion was henceforth adopted. I will briefly convey to you the conclusions and positions taken by the Committee of the Regions. First of all, we decided to welcome the efforts being undertaken by the European Commission in creating such a multi-annual financial framework, which was certainly no easy task. We all know what the situation is. The UK is leaving the European Union, and now we had to come up with a budget to cover 27 member countries as opposed to 28. Therefore, the Commission is to be commended for its work. Nonetheless, the Committee of the Regions had a number of major objections to raise about some aspects, affecting, as we believe in a negative way, all forms of local self-government. We were adamant that this should be improved in the final version of the text to be adopted soon, we hope. We also stood up against reducing the amount of cohesion policies, since the scope is now much narrower than it used to be. We believe that cohesion policies are a fundamental instrument of the European Union. It is a development policy, serving all citizens across the European Union, and particularly important for less well-developed regions. Given that, we believe that things should stay at the same level as before. Likewise, we stood up against cutting funds for the CAP. This particularly applies to rural development, to fisheries, important policies that were to undergo some reductions and cuts. Likewise, the Commission proposal envisages worse conditions for access to European funds and for the use of European funds in terms of pre-financing, in terms of financing, in terms of the periods during which the funds can actually be drawn upon. So M3 was now to become M2. Right now, there is a 3-year period during which these funds can be drawn, and this was now to be reduced to a mere 2 years. Nonetheless, this is very important for our local self-government bodies, and we all know full well that our cities and towns don't have sufficient funds available to them in order to run all these projects. Therefore, the increase from 15 to 30% is something that we could by no means accept. Likewise, we stood up to cuts proposed in relation to CEF, the Connecting Europe facility. Likewise, we welcomed these links being established between the funds on the one hand and the rule of law on the other. We said, however, that this should by no means negatively affect the end users, the consumers. If there is a member country violating the rule of law, it is not our towns and cities that should be expected to foot the bill. We also welcomed the Commission proposal for more funds to be used for research and innovation, which is very important for our youth, for our borders, for our defence, for migrations, for all these emerging challenges that the European Union is now facing. However, not at the expense of cohesion policies and of the common agricultural policy. In order to somehow even things out, the Commission started with the following assumption. Certain funds envisaged as European Union revenue must be sufficient to cover all these expenses, included in the COR proposal. The Parliament proposed more or less the same thing. This should be about 1.3 GDP of the European Union, the Parliament said, and so did the Committee of the Regions, which would be quite enough to cover higher expenses related to these new challenges, while preserving our cohesion policies and our common agricultural policy. We push in our proposal for the MMF to be adopted as soon as possible. Nonetheless, this is complicated, and it's now up to the European Council, up to our prime ministers and the Parliament, of course. We would like to get on with this as quickly as possible, but certainly not at the expense of our cohesion policies, common agricultural policies, and the conditions for the financing of these funds. This will be very detrimental for all levels of our local self-government, and our towns, cities and regions would definitely bear the brunt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dobroslavich. We will now give the floor to the second speaker, but I let you know that we have a question and answer at the final of the debate. So the second speaker is the State Secretary of the Ministry and Regional Development from Croatia, Mrs. Spomenka Duric, and I want to know if in Croatia cohesion policy has good results, and what are your expectations for the next MFF for make in Croatia good things for cities and regions?
Thank you for your question. Good morning to everyone. Dobro jutro vam svima želim. Sve vas srdačno.
Very good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. And I would like to thank the Committee of the Region for this opportunity to participate in this international conference organized by the Dubrovnik Neretva County. I'd like to particularly thank our county president. Likewise, a warm welcome to our mayors, mayor deputies, but also our county representatives. County President Pauk, specifically our MP, and all of our distinguished guests. As I said, I'm exceptionally pleased to be here and to be able to participate in the work of this conference. Apologies on behalf of Minister Pavic. Nonetheless, he could not make it. He couldn't be here for this conference. The workload is simply too great these days back in Croatia, in his own sector, and therefore he couldn't make it to Brussels. Our debate moderator today asked me a number of questions, and I will spend some time trying to explain our position. I will try to explain how Croatia sees the future challenges lying ahead of us and how that is likely to affect us on the ground, the towns and cities, as well as our municipalities. All these challenges being faced by the European Union today are manifold, as you all know. We are talking about both internal and external factors. We're talking about technological change, globalization, Brexit, migrations. All these major trends are affecting us, and we have to deal with this at European Union level. There can be no doubt about that. Nonetheless, it's important to point out, as Mr. Dobroslavich just has, that our cohesion policies are also the EU's main investment policy, and one of the most hands-on expressions of solidarity that we have across the EU. As such, it should by no means be seen as the only resource being used to bankroll our responses to all these challenges ahead of us. Cohesion policies are normally described as the EU's traditional policy. One of the EU's traditional policy. It is part and parcel of all the relevant treaties, but also because it represents a large share of the European budget. Over the years, these policies have been gradually modernized and have become more dynamic. We heard the presentation yesterday. What we are facing in the period post-2020. So cohesion policy has had to be modernized simply because there was no choice. The sole objective being to get the best possible results in terms of general prosperity, not just of the European Union as a whole, but its individual citizens as well. The European Commission has Croatia's full backing in these efforts to get everyone on board, all the member countries, on the MMF by the end of this year, particularly as regards cohesion policy. Reaching an agreement on the new legislative package on the MMF, but also on cohesion policy as such, is something that will pave the way for us for our transition from one programming period to another. This is very important for us since we are the youngest member country. We know all about these transitions from one period to the next, how that has affected Croatia and specific programs that we are running on the ground. This has a number of different reasons. We covered the previous two periods, 07 through 13 and 14 through 20, and we had to face quite a number of drawbacks and backlogs at the outset. All these are very complex issues. We must formulate some sort of a compromise on so-called red lines, minimum priorities, and this has to be agreed unanimously by all 28 member countries. Croatia obviously is prepared to show both solidarity and flexibility. We're more than willing to seek a compromise, but not at the expense of our own priorities. By no means. We would like the EU priorities to somehow fall in line with our own peculiarities and priorities that are very important to us. Just to name a particularly salient example, and Mr. Dobrosavich has addressed some already. So we're talking about the relevant period to be used for calculating the national envelopes. And this is a deal breaker for Croatia. If the period is to be altered, so no longer 15 through 16, but 17 through 18, so whether you take into account 1 year more or 1 year less, depending on that, Croatia might be facing a 21% cut, which means that the aid would go from 298 to 238 euros per citizen. Now that I've given you the figures, perhaps you understand better why this is a true priority for all of us, perhaps the mother of all priorities. Anyway, if the time period is to change, GDP would rise by almost an entire point. Now it is 59.7 and it would rise to 60.5%. Nonetheless, the policy intensity criterion is just half a point in that case. Therefore, you see how the cut would affect us. On the other hand, it is, I think, quite obvious that this change, despite the fact that we're talking about a rise in our GDP and a number of other things, this would mean that we would no longer have access to the same amount of funds, which would be very difficult for us to take, naturally. Furthermore, we must strike some sort of balance between the European Union's collective goals and objectives and making it possible for our member countries, each and every one of them, in line with their regional and national priorities and changing circumstances, to determine how to distribute and actually use the envelope. We agree with the COR, of course, and their position, as expressed by Mr. Dobrosavich. The project implementation period should not change. We should stick to M3 for a simple reason. If we reduce the period as proposed, that does not necessarily lead to faster implementation. However, this might also affect the quality of project preparation and the quality of proposals. As for the national rates for pre-financing and financing, we oppose this. We oppose the increase. We believe that any change to the national rates cannot lead to any value added at EU level, nor would our ownership of these projects really receive a boost. This rise from 15 to 20% simply doesn't justify that. And last but not least, let me touch upon Croatia's presidency of the Council. We are the most recent member country, the youngest member country, and will take over presidency in just under 3 months. We're all perfectly aware of the responsibility resting squarely on our shoulders now. We shall go ahead with the negotiations as the responsible member country that we are, and we're prepared to come to grips with this across the sectors. Nonetheless, Croatia's presidency will focus on adopting the legislation that is currently in the offing. And this will, we believe, greatly contribute to the EU's development overall across the sectors. We need a balanced approach to development across the EU and all its member countries, and this is something that we should continue to focus on, also in terms of cohesion policies over the future period. And that is also what we will be focusing while negotiating all these deals. We must strive to reduce inequalities and to continue to try and build a stronger and future-proof EU. In order to make these MMF negotiations easier, as well as those concerning cohesion funds, and in order to avoid any future delays, which might be bad for the implementation, we know fully well how important it is to create synergies, how important it is to continue to listen to each other and to be understanding of each other. Bearing that in mind, as one final remark, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I wish you and all of us every success in your future work, not just for the remainder of this period, but also over the first half of next year, which will see Croatia presiding over the work of the Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Duric. And now I give the floor to the new elected member of the Parliament, Carlo Ressler. As I said before, very large participation of young generation was the last election. So, Carlo, how do you represent this new generation in this negotiation about the next MFF?
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. Dobro jutro svima. Još jednom, prije svega župane Dobroslavić, župane Pauk, državna tajnica Đurić, hvala vam puno još jednom na pozivu da razgovaramo o ovoj aktualnoj temi. Čini mi se da stvarno teško da ima teme koja je aktualnije i na ovoj europskoj razini, a onda time posljedično i za Hrvatsku. Budući da se radi o tome kako će se sve ono o čemu govorimo, sve ono što su nekakvi i proračunski prioriteti, sve ono što se deklarira kao temelj naše politike, biti pretvoreno u stvarnost, biti pretvoreno u stvarnost upravo kroz proračun Europske unije za sljedećih 7 godina. Ja jesam mladi član Europskog parlamenta, ali bez obzira što sam određen dakako i sa tom činjenicom, određuje me i to da dolazim iz Hrvatske kao najmlađe članice Europske unije, tako da je možda to i dobra kombinacija koja itekako dobro pokazuje da se i u razgovoru o europskom proračunu zapravo radi o jednoj lažnoj dilemi kada se govori o tome hoćemo li se dovoljno usmjeriti na budućnost, hoćemo li se okrenuti novim prioritetima, hoćemo li ulagati dovoljno sredstava u obrazovanje, u nove izazove kao što su izazove migracija, u povećanje inovacija, konkurentnosti Europe prema drugim globalnim rastućim akterima, ili ćemo sa druge strane zadržati one tradicionalne politike Europske unije koje su u samim temeljima i europskih ugovora, ali isto tako u samim temeljima onoga što i naši građani doživljavaju kao Europu, dakle solidarnost, politike koje smanjuju velike razlike koje još uvijek postoje između pojedinih država članica. Mislim da bi se takva dilema trebala nadići. Mislim da je proračun, da to nije uvijek jednostavno, ali da je proračun pravi alat kroz koji bismo trebali i zadržati jednu, dakle imati jednu okrenutost prema budućnosti, shvatiti i u kakvom vremenu živimo, shvatiti koji su to novi izazovi, shvatiti koje su sve potrebe mlađih generacija, ali isto tako shvatiti da ne smijemo odustajati od onih politika koje su učinile Europu snažnom, ali koje su stvorile povjerenje koji građani imaju u to. Zbog toga mislim da je itekako bitna i današnja rezolucija Europskog parlamenta o kojoj ćemo glasovati za koji sat, a sa kojim će se još jednom naglasiti pozicija parlamenta koja je već izrečena i u studenom 2018. godine, a to je upravo takav jedan srednji put koji nije jednostavno naći, pogotovo na razini vijeća, ali vjerujem da je to moguće i vjerujem da ćemo upravo kroz naše djelovanje u vijeću, kasnije i kroz Europsko vijeće, uspjeti zadržati sve ono o čemu je govorila i Spomenka Đurić u pogledu kohezijske politike. Dobar dio mojih talking pointsa je zapravo slijedio isto ove prioritete. To nema smisla ponavljati, ali je još jedan dobar pokazatelj kako je bitno da smo povezani i kako je bitno da i po ovoj temi znamo koji su naši interesi i znamo prepoznati ono što je bitno i vama u vašim jedinicama lokalne područne samouprave i na onda ovoj nacionalnoj razini, ali isto tako i na ovoj europskoj. Meni se čini da je najveći izazov svakako, osim ovog referentnog razdoblja, povećanje sufinanciranja. Dakle, povećanje koje je dvostruko povećanje koje se predlaže i koje bi za Hrvatsku značilo po različitim izračunima različito, ali sigurno preko 2 milijarde eura. To su značajna sredstva koja bi imale i veće posljedice od toga, budući da bi se odrazile ne samo na taj manjak, nego i na činjenicu da bi itekako bilo teže financirati neke od projekata koji su se inače mislili provoditi. Predviđeni iznos koji je ukupan za koheziju odnosi se znači za sljedeće proračunsko razdoblje na otprilike 391 milijardu eura i sa tom kompleksnom formulom, takozvanim berlinskim izračunom, onda dolazimo do pojedinih alokacija za pojedine države članice. I postoji cijeli niz onda tehničkih pitanja od kojih su neki nama najbitniji spomenuti, koji su nam ključni osim samog iznosa sredstava koji će biti na raspolaganju u Hrvatskoj, a odnose se i na sama pravila provođenja projekata, na pravila programiranja koje se uglavnom onda i pregovaraju unutar vijeća u kojem glavnu ulogu ima naše Ministarstvo regionalnog razvoja. Ono što je još možda bitno istaknuti, a tiče se stajališta Europskog parlamenta, je da je vizija Europskog parlamenta bez obzira na promjene i na novi saziv poprilično jasna. Zato je danas bitno i danas je jedan od ciljeva da rezolucija u Europskom parlamentu bude potvrđena barem sa onakvom razinom kakvom je bila i u studenom prošle godine. A ta pozicija se znači odnosi da je potrebno povećanje sredstava za područja kao što su inovacije, istraživanje za program Erasmus+, kao jedan od uvjerljivo najuspješnijih programa Europske unije, potpore za srednja i mala poduzeća za veće poticanje zapošljavanje mladih, ali isto tako i na sve one prioritete koji se tiču sigurnosti, koji se tiču migracija. Hrvatska je danas sigurno jedna od država članica koja podnosi najveći teret migracijskog pritiska na Europu uz Grčku i Cipar i zbog svega toga je bitno da proračun na neki način pretoči sve one prioritete koje su i europski građani izrekli na europskim izborima u svibnju ove godine i da budu odraz očekivanja birača. Ali isto tako kada se krene od nekakve bottom-up metode, dakle sa terena i kada se ide prema gore, kada vidimo koji su to sve prioriteti, kada vidimo što je još sve potrebno u kohezijskom politikom, onda dođemo do te cijele široke slike i zbog toga je pogrešno uzimati određeni postotak, uzimati 1,1, pa čak i 1,3%, dakle od bruto nacionalnog dohotka kao nekakvu polaznu točku, nego to mora biti tek onaj konačni cilj do kojeg dođemo kada smo utvrdili sve one politike, sve one prioritete oko kojih postoji široko suglasje u Europskom parlamentu da se oni moraju provoditi. Zbog svega toga će i današnja rezolucija biti još jedan snažan pokazatelj i Europskom vijeću, ali i Europskoj komisiji da Europski parlament želi slijediti i volju europskih birača i da na taj način želi poručiti i otvorenost prema budućnosti, prema svim novim prioritetima, ali isto tako i poruku o očuvanju iste razine financiranja za kohezijsku i regionalnu politiku i u narednom razdoblju. Glavne izazove za Hrvatsku smo već prepoznali, smo već zapravo čuli u ovim ranijim govorima. Ono što je još bitno je sama procedura, a to je da, dakle, kada dođe do nekakve najveće razine usuglašenosti, kada se pojavi to pitanje i na Europskom vijeću, da će postojati još prostora za finalne korekcije, da će postojati još prostora za jasno artikuliranje onoga što je Hrvatskoj bitno. Višegodišnji financijski okvir usvaja se sa jednoglasnom većinom na Europskom vijeću i to daje dosta snažnu poziciju svakoj državi članici, pa tako i Hrvatskoj, da dakle jasno postavi koje su to nekakve crvene linije ispod kojih ne bismo smjeli ići. Ono što je nažalost sada već sasvim očito je da kako stvari stoje će se gotovo sigurno višegodišnji financijski okvir usvojiti na Europskom vijeću, onda kasnije i potvrditi od Europskog parlamenta, ali isto tako da će se i nakon toga tek usvojiti cijeli onaj drugi zakonodavni paket koji se tiče samih pravila korištenja fondova. Nažalost, negdje u zadnjim dijelovima sljedeće godine, vrlo je vjerojatno, zbog čega je očito da onda za sve one koji provode europske fondove, za sve oni koji će ih programirati u nacionalnim državama članicama i koji će ih koristiti, će to ostaviti to malo razdoblje za prilagodbu, kako je bilo nažalost i prije 7 godina, ali bi to trebalo biti još jedan dodatni motiv i da svi budemo uključeni, da svi budemo povezani i da što je moguće prije pokušamo ispratiti sve te promjene koje će se događati. Intencija je da se pravila pojednostavljuju, međutim samom činjenicom da se ona mijenjaju, to znači da će za većinu onih koji provode te projekte u državama članicama to biti kompliciranije i da će biti potreban taj jedan period za prilagodbu. Ja bih sa ovim zaključio, pozivam vas sve da pročitate i pogledate i rezolucije Europskog parlamenta koje će se usvojiti danas. Ona će biti po meni, kako ja to vidim, dakle iz nekakve naše hrvatske perspektive, jedan jasan odraz realnosti, odraz toga da želimo i moramo sve one prioritete koje smo naglašavali, pa i u izbornoj kampanji, ali i sve ono što građani očekuju, da se to mora pretočiti i u europski proračun, ali isto tako da one politike Europske unije koje su u njezinim samim temeljima i u načelu solidarnosti se ne smiju mijenjati, da treba ih ostaviti dovoljno dobro isfinancirane, jer jedino tako se mogu nastaviti smanjivati razlike između država članica. Hvala puno.
Thank you, Carlo. And now we give the floor to Mrs. Simona Manova, Director General for Budget from European Commission. So Simona, is a complex work you have to done in the next future. So what's your opinion about that?
Well, thank you very much. My opinion remains very positive, and I'm very happy to be here today to tell you why. I want to thank in particular Mr. Dobrosłavic for his welcome also earlier this year in Dubrovnik. I feel very much amongst friends when we discuss cohesion, despite the criticisms to our proposal with regard to the modest cuts that we've introduced. I would like to wish you all the best of luck for the presidency. I had the pleasure to visit Croatia last year with Commissioner Oettinger, and preparations were already started. And as a Bulgarian, another new member state that recently took the presidency like Romania, we can understand the challenge, and we wish you all the best in that. In Croatia, I was very lucky also to see many good results of cohesion policy projects. And I would like to make sure, together with you, that with a modern policy and a modern budget, we can keep up the good results also for the next period. How are we going to do that? The Commission has been very active, just like the Committee of the Regions, and luckily most of the institutions in this process, in pushing a very, I think, balanced and modern agenda for the next multi-annual financial framework. As you know, there is a European Council next week to discuss for the first time on substance the MFF proposal already put forward last year in May. It is time really to decide, because when I go and speak to beneficiaries, to project managers, to local authorities, people want to have clarity. The usual question that I get from people on the ground actually implementing projects is not whether or not cohesion policy overall was reduced by 3% or 6%, but when do we start? Do we start now? Do we start as of January 1st, 2021? Because the current experience was that when the current multi-annual financial framework was agreed, it took a very long time. And once we have an agreement on the MFF, the process just starts, because then we have the Common Provisions Regulation, we have the Cohesion Funds Regulations, and then we have the different partnership agreements for each country and then for each region. So what we want to do as a Commission and as stakeholders in this process is really to put pressure and keep the deadline that leaders actually agreed in June this year to agree on the overall. Okay, thank you. To have an agreement by the end of this year. This is why it's so important, and this is why events like the EU Regions Week are so important, because they keep the traction, they keep the interest, and they showcase why it is so important that this process doesn't go on and on and on. So what we did yesterday is issue yet another communication with which the Commission, as an honest broker, contributes to the European Council's deliberations on the MFF. What does it say? First of all, leaders have to agree on a realistic range on the overall size of the MFF. What the Commission has proposed is a 1.114 MFF in percent of gross national income of the EU 27. What does that mean? Why is this number so important? The UK is leaving, which means a little shortfall in our budget. How do we propose to address this? By 50% of the shortfall will be covered by cuts, but very moderate cuts in long-standing policies, but also with fresh money. We believe this is a balanced way to treat this and at the same time ensure what Carlo talked about, the new priorities, the reinforced priorities, the youth, innovation, digital agenda, migration spending. So we believe a size of 1.114 is actually a balanced position that can ensure that. What do member states say? Some of them say, no, we have to spend at 1%. These are the better spending group. Now, why is this not enough? The cuts would be deeper, increases would be impossible, there would be no modern budget. Also, even today, we're not spending at 1%. Today, the EU at 27 spends 1.16% of its GNI. This is the reference point. We're going to be 27 member states, unfortunately, but even today, we're not spending at 1%. So such a stance is clearly incompatible with what Europe wants to do collectively, as many of the speakers said already. Others, nevertheless, support the Commission proposal, but would like to see cohesion and agricultural policy at current levels. That is also not sustainable if we also want to invest in other policies. So we need to strike the right balance, and we need leaders to decide on a range that would work for all. That is a key objective. Something else that we're saying and related to that, and I've brought you some additional information because that's what the Commission does, is to inform. Next to the exit, you see the fact sheets that I've brought today. So 2 more messages. One is on financing. I am Bulgarian, and we have a lot of Croatians among us, luckily, very positive people. But as new member states, our economies are still catching up with the EU average. That's a fact, and cohesion policy, again, luckily, with its excellent results, and you mentioned a few, is helping this GDP growth. However, in terms of national contributions to the budget, versus the economic side of each of the countries, Bulgaria and Croatia actually pay the most. Our national, well, I'm with the Commission, but Bulgarian and Croatian national contributions as a percentage of their GDPs is much higher and above the EU average than compared to those groups of member states that first of all get a rebate on their contribution, and secondly are among the 8 biggest economies in the EU today. So we're saying, let's have a budget of an appropriate size, and let's do away gradually with rebates because it's not fair and it's not commensurate to the world and the EU that we live in today. Because the rebate on the UK was introduced in 1984, and we're not there anymore. I was born in 1984. So this is one of the points. The other one is, you see how difficult it is for national contributions to be sustainable for the big economies and for the smaller economies likewise. This is why we're proposing to introduce new sources of revenues, new own resources. And there, what the Commission does is again leverage on the Parliament's position, and that's a very important institution in this negotiation process. 1.3% overall size, introduction of new own resources, we count very much on the leverage of the European Parliament in these negotiations to modernize also the revenue side of the budget. And the other message that we're passing along is this has to be a modern budget. We need to have more financing for new priorities so that Europe remains competitive, and also a key player on the global arena. And here I want to play a little bit with numbers, because that's what we do with DigiBudget, right? And that's what I'm here to explain. If you take the cohesion overall envelope that we propose, is 373 billion for the 27 EU member states. This is our proposal. That would be 30%, almost 29% of all the programs, all the policy shares in the proposed budget. If you take the Croatian envelope within this, it's about 9-10 billion for Croatia. This is comparable to the Migration Fund for the whole EU 27, to the Border Management Fund, again, for the whole EU 27, for the Digital Europe, a totally new program that will invest in new technologies, innovation, digitalization. So let's put these numbers in perspective, and let's keep this balance where cohesion and agriculture remain these important priorities, but also give a little bit of leeway for Europe to become a leader in innovation, to be more secure, to be a better defended continent, and also a better partner elsewhere. So just to conclude, what regional and local authorities can do is keep their active stance, keep the position, keep the pressure for a fast agreement, because that would be of a direct benefit to all the players on the field, and keep the pressure for the timing. Now, I think December remains realistic, and it's not just my opinion, it's a matter of discussion. I hear you when you say there is a risk for delay, but then again, what better success for the upcoming Croatian presidency if you could close these negotiations? And worst case scenario, I wish you such an excellent result. Thank you.
Thank you, Simona, for your kind information. And now we give the floor to Mr. Goran Pauk, President of Croatian County Association. And I want to say that no matter about the budget for the next cohesion policy, it's important to communicate with all levels. We prepare this cohesion policy, European, national and local levels. And in my opinion, I said that communication has to be done in all phases of programming, and this is very important. So, Mr. President, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Prije svega pozdrav svima ovdje nazočnima u ime Hrvatske.
First and foremost, I would like to welcome everyone here on behalf of our County Association, and I would like to thank our hosts for the invitation. I will tell you about a number of positions held by my organization, but beyond that, I think we're all perfectly aware of two important facts. Funds are not as widely available in Europe as they used to be. We all know that, unless obviously there is a greater contribution from national GDPs. We certainly hope that this will be headed in the direction of 1.3 GDP. And the other fact is we need to introduce new policies. This is a widely debated subject in view of all the challenges that lie ahead. In my official capacity, I would like to say that we support this proposal for creating these special headings: migrations, border management, security, defense, more for research and development. Nonetheless, as for cohesion policy and CAP, the cuts are certainly not acceptable for us as a regional administration. These are fundamental EU policies, as some speakers have pointed out. There must be no cuts, because any reductions would only further deepen the divide between European countries and European regions, particularly those regions facing some demographic hardship, urban as opposed to rural areas, which would be a very negative trend. As a county, we have our own representatives in the COR, and obviously we've been very much following this MMF debate. We have the opinion of the Committee of the Regions, and we have the Parliament's opinion as well. As a region, as a country, obviously, we have informed our government and all the other relevant stakeholders of our position. We believe that this proposal will be quite negative for our local self-government, for our regions, and for the EU's less well-developed countries. This is reflected in everything that has been said today. I will try to list these things briefly. Cutting cohesion policy funds, I think the cut should be about 10%. CAP, particularly rural development policies, the cut should be by 28%. Fisheries, 13% cut. This is entirely unacceptable and would definitely put a dampener on our two most traditional, most successful policies, bringing the greatest value added at EU level. And certainly, these policies can be seen as the great leveler. So we have less favorable terms for pre-financing and for co-financing. We heard what Carlos said. Some people keep touting the figure of 2 billion euros, given the rise from 15 to 30%. We would also not like to see the implementation deadlines cut. I'm talking about the transition between M3 and M2. It is the end user that would be really hit very hard, would have to bear the brunt of these moves and cuts. Likewise, group projects would become infinitely more complex, particularly given this transition from M3 to M2, which means shorter implementation deadlines with an increasing risk that is associated with all these changes. Therefore, we are against these proposals. And also, we would not like to see any cuts to the Connecting Europe facility. We feel that this is very important, particularly for us back in Croatia and in the broader region. The conference has addressed a number of these problems, and we know Europe is an ancient continent, but some of its regions still remain remote and poorly connected. So that would be a final note as far as our position is concerned. We support migrations, we support border management, we support youth initiatives, we support research and innovation, we support anything that can be used to modernize the European Union, but not at the expense of cohesion policies, not at the expense of the common agricultural policy. I heard what Simona just said, and I'm still hoping that in our future debate we can sort of balance things out a little. Europe must remain a union that is trying to modernize its policies on one hand, but on the other, we must also uphold our traditional policies, our traditional values, such as cohesion and agriculture. Many thanks yet again. I'm very pleased to be here with you.
Now we have, thank you very much, and now we have a little time for take questions. If somebody want to intervene in this debate, please free to do it now. If there is question and answer for our speakers or contributions, please. Yeah?
I have one question. Thanks, Ivo Klajić, Dubrovnik-Neretva County. Evo kako smo čuli od cijenjenih panelista.
Well, as we've just heard from our panelists, we see that there are bound to be cuts over the next programming period. This is something that Mr. Ressler pointed out too. These policies are the traditional policies that have made the European Union stronger. Nonetheless, we are losing sight of this. Even those countries backing the cyclists underlined that we would need 2 programming periods to catch up with these new levels. Therefore, my question: is there an established practice in relation to new member countries. Could Croatia, as the EU's youngest member country, be exempt from these very strict conditions applying to other countries across the region? Carlo? Yes, perhaps I could add a couple of words, but then I think it would make sense to pass the floor to Simona. As far as I know, that there have been such instances over the years. We are the youngest member country, but this applies not just to us, but to other countries joining earlier on. Cohesion policies are calibrated differently depending on the country. As for this budget, it represents an attempt to strike a good balance between new member countries and old member countries. The structure itself is also meant to achieve the same objective, and that's what the Commission has underlined. This should become clearer and clearer as time goes by. As for any cuts to our cohesion policies, I don't think this should be on the agenda, because cohesion policies traditionally have been one of the European Union's strongest tools, and I think we should hold on to that.
Simona?
I agree with Carlo, and what we should bear in mind is the cohesion policy allocations by country are done based on this Berlin formula, which you mentioned earlier, and they take into account the specificities of each member state. So old or new, they're tailored to the local conditions, because that is the objective of cohesion policy, and that is why it exists in the first place. So we have GDP taken into account, we have unemployment, but today we also have migration and climate in the formula as well. Something else that we should keep in mind is the funds that are actually bearing moderate, let's call it trimming, if you will. Because if you take the European Regional and Development Fund, the cuts there are not as deep as, for example, Cohesion Fund, which is more targeted. And also, you have the European Social Fund, which remains a very, very strong one among the three that we're talking about. And the last thing I wanted to say is, in terms of specificities in implementation, there is indeed a learning curve. I think it's the common path of all countries to go through it. But also, our proposal is not to introduce the N+2 rule abruptly. This is not the case. We have a phasing-in mechanism. We want to keep up good absorption, because we think this is a good stimulus for more projects to flow in. And after all, I would call for more absorption and more projects, so that we actually spend the envelope than to focus on the envelope itself.
Anyone else? Yeah, please.
Jelena Dadić, Dubrovačko-neretvanska županija.
Jelena Dadić, Dubrovnik-Neretva County. A very good morning to you all. We've been running quite a large number of European projects in our county, and we are certainly one of the most successful counties across Croatia. Those of us who are involved in the day-to-day work on European projects face various types of limitations and difficulties in a procedural sense. Designing projects, implementing projects, the procedure is quite complex. As for the new period, there are bound to be some changes affecting our work. Applying and submitting projects, the procedure will be different. But what I would like to know is how exactly and what novelties can we expect in that regard. Thank you very much for this question. It really goes straight to the heart of the issue. Seen from a European Commission perspective, if you look at this package, there are quite a number of simplifications to procedures that used to be either imposed or implemented by the European Union. Nonetheless, the responsibility now rests on the shoulders of the member country. Certain simplifications will be introduced. Nonetheless, it is now the responsibility of the member country. It is down to us how we implement projects, whether it's going to be M+3 or M+2. Also, any expenses reported to the EU must be legal and transparent. The European Commission no longer has a procedure for submitting large-scale projects, which does not mean that those will not be funded. It's just that the responsibility for preparing both projects and implementation will be squarely with the member state. Just to keep things as simple as possible, this means that we will not be submitting documents to the European Commission for approval at a preliminary stage. Everything will be our responsibility. We do need alternative mechanisms, though, to make sure the quality is there, to make sure the absorption works for the envelope. And we'll try to keep access to the greatest possible amount of funds, obviously.
We have this week we have a lot of debates on this next MFF, but the key word is balance between the policy of all the policy of Europe and the other words to have a budget in due line, because the time is very important for all of us and we have to avoid delays, and so we have a complex work to do, but I think that we have to do it. Now I give the floor to the President of Nicola Dobroslavic to make the closing remarks. Please, Mr. President.
Thank you. I would like to thank you all for this great debate. And a useful one at that. As for our conclusions, we need to get the MF adopted as quickly as possible. It should be a quality instrument. We need to really consider new sources of income for the European Union. This is required to meet head-on our challenges in terms of global competition. We must, however, not neglect our traditional policies, such as cohesion policy and CAP. In the Committee of the Regions yesterday, we adopted a new resolution. The Parliament, as we hear, will be adopting its own resolution today. These resolutions are quite alike, addressing precisely the subject of our debate today: cohesion policies, new own resources, and this will contribute to the work of the European Council in terms of finding a quality solution to all these problems. Thank you very much, and thank you to our interpretation team as well.